we're going to mention is, does the Quran quote the Bible? Okay, so in the Quran, there are a couple of things that are very, very similar to the Bible. These are the two main things that are similar to the Bible. There's one in the Quran, it says, my servants shall inherit the land, and also an eye for a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a nose for a nose, an ear for an ear, a tooth for a tooth, and for wounds of equal retaliation. This is very similar to the verse in the Bible which says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, burning for burning, etc. It's very similar. Now, it's important to note that parallels don't equate to quotation. Just because you see a similarity, it doesn't mean that it's a quote. That's something that we must understand, right? Now, an eye for an eye is actually the oldest law to man, and it's first found in the Hammurabi pagan law, which actually predates the Bible. Now, some may think that it's a stretch to assume that the Bible took this law from the Hammurabi law, but it is actually very possible, as the Hammurabi laws, there's many other Hammurabi laws found within the Bible itself, okay? However, we're not saying that the eye for an eye verse in the Bible is taken from the Hammurabi law. We're simply saying we don't know. We don't know where the Bible got their source of information from, okay? Because there's the possibility of alternative sources, we cannot affirm it was taken from the Torah. So we don't say, oh, an eye for an eye law is wahi, it was taken from the Torah, because we don't know. The prophets told us, don't affirm what they say, don't deny what they say. Tell them we believe it was sent down to us. That's what we believe. That's a general answer to them. How can we assume that it's taken from there when there's other possibilities of truths and other possible sources of truth which they had access to when they were compiling and writing the Bible? Another important point is that there are also similarities of narratives within the Bible. There's, the narrative of Moses, the narrative of Yusuf. Again, I would say 80-90% of the story of Moses and Yusuf kind of correlates with the Islamic narrative. However, it doesn't agree in the most fundamental teachings of the Islamic narrative. Whenever subhanAllah, it always seems to fail when it speaks about the prophets. It speaks about them in an evil way, in a bad way, doing crimes. And this is not the Islamic narrative. The Islamic narrative and the Islamic belief in the prophets is that they were protected from major sins. They were protected from intentionally disobeying Allah. So when we understand this principle that truth doesn't equate to wahi, right? And there's also possible alternative sources for the Bible, we don't know if this particular narrative was part of the Torah. So for instance, we've got the story of Musa. He's born, he's put in the basket. The Pharaoh finds him. He's raised in the house of Pharaoh. You have the plagues of Pharaoh, and then the children of Israel leave, and then they part the sea and they leave, and they flee. But before that, Prophet Musa got married, and then he went back to Midian, and then he subhanAllah takes the children of Israel into the desert. The narrative is there. And the narrative is in the Bible, but that doesn't mean that narrative was in the Torah. It doesn't even mean it's revelation. There would have been people with Moses. When Moses was going through this story, when this was happening in the life of Musa, people were speaking about it. It was a part of oral tradition. And these traditions were formed, they were passed down from time to time, and eventually they were committed to writing. And we find in the Torah that these oral traditions have reached the Old Testament. Sorry, not the Torah. We find in the Old Testament that you have these oral traditions of Moses and Yusuf or Joseph, and 80% of it is true because the narrative is there. But it doesn't mean that it was part of the Torah. For instance, Isa performing miracles. It doesn't mean that that was in the Injeel. Somebody could have seen Isa and Musa perform miracles, and they spoke about it, and the oral tradition was passed down, and eventually it was committed to writing. And this is true. The truths, things that agree with the Quran, are true. Because the Quran is the criterion. It's Al-Furqan. Whatever agrees with the Quran is true. However, it doesn't mean that it's revelation. It doesn't mean just because it's true that it's part of the Torah and Injeel. And another thing is, how do we explain that the fact that the tradition is very close to the tradition in the Quran? Allah could have used these narratives and perfected them and corrected it without having previously been revealed. So again, the narrative of the story of Musa is true. The backbone, if you like, the skeleton of the story is true. So the narrative is going to be very similar. And then Allah reveals this same narrative in the Quran, but corrects all the wrongness in it. In fact, that's even more miraculous. The fact that he uses a narrative that they've brought and corrects it and makes it more eloquent, subhanAllah. It doesn't mean that that narrative was previously revealed. And another example of this is like Ayatul Kursi. You know, we know the benefits of Ayatul Kursi because Abu Hurairah caught a shayateen stealing a zakat. And the shayateen told us, if you recite Ayatul Kursi, it will protect you from the shaitan. Okay? This is not revelation. It's true information. But then Abu Hurairah went to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him, and what, this is what the shayateen told me. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, what he said is true. However, he's a liar. So that point when the Prophet ﷺ affirms that knowledge, that is what is wahi. Because we can connect it to Allah and His Messenger. Similarly, Umar ibn Khattab, he had a few points in his life where he had a fatwa in mind. He had an idea that he thought should be implemented. And in fact, Allah implemented it afterwards. Allah brought that law. Was Allah, did Umar teach Allah? No. Just because Allah affirms the law, what Umar had an idea about, it doesn't mean that Umar had wahi. Okay? So this is the point we need to understand, that there are things in the Bible that parallel, but parallels do not equate to quotation. We believe in what was sent down to us and what was sent down to them without affirming anything within their scriptures to be wahi. Okay? We don't deny the possibility of it being in the original Zabur. It could be a remnant from the Zabur. However, the Psalms is not the Zabur. The Old Testament, the Pentateuch, is not the Torah. If it agrees with the Quran and the Sunnah, it is true, but wouldn't be considered as wahi, as we don't know the source of that information. It cannot be connected back to Allah or His prophets. And this brings us to the question, is the Bible originally the Torah and Injeel, or a book authored by men? Do you view the Bible as that it was originally the Torah and Injeel and it's been altered? That some people held that view in time, but most people today don't. They say, no, the Bible has never been the Torah and Injeel. It's a book authored by people, and they've used various different sources of evidence to in their writings, and they may have even taken from the Torah and Injeel, but the concept of the Bible itself is not the Torah and Injeel. This is the concept that most Muslims take today, because we know from modern research what the Bible is, how it was always been written by men. And when I mean written by men, I mean authored by men. Not just recorded by men, authored by men. So the point of that is the individual who's authoring that book, he's choosing to include different parts of information from different sources. Because we don't know the source of this information, we cannot assume it is from revelation. Just no matter how closely the parallel is, we can't assume. Ibn Kathir, this brings us to Ibn Kathir's point, because he clarifies that we believe it. He said, we believe in what was revealed to us and what has been revealed to you. Meaning, if they inform you of something whose truth or falsehood is unknown, then we do not proceed to deny it, for it might be true, nor do we affirm it, for it might be false. So sometimes they may give us knowledge, well, they may give us information, I should say, about certain things, and we can't affirm it from the Quran and the Sunnah, so we don't affirm or we don't deny. And then Ibn Kathir goes on to say, rather, we believe in it in general, under the condition, and this is the important part, it's conditional. We believe in it in general under the condition that, number one, it is revealed. Number two, it's not altered. No tahrif, no tabdil. Or neither is it misinterpreted. So this general confirmation is conditional. Ibn Kathir is very clear. It has to be revealed, not altered, not misinterpreted. This, in order to affirm something like this, is impossible today. How can you affirm any of it to be revelation when you don't have an isnad? How can you affirm any of it to be not altered? Especially, how can you affirm it to be revelation when it doesn't even claim to be? It claims to be biographies, letters, poems. How can you claim it's not altered when it clearly is? And it has no isnad? And the misinterpretation of it, we don't even know who authored it. So understanding the author's intentions is impossible. And then Ibn Kathir goes on to say, then let it be known that most of what they narrate is predominantly lies and falsehood, because it has entered into it distortion, alteration, change, and interpretation, and how little truth there is in it. Then how little benefit much of it has, even if it was true. Subhanallah. Very strong words from Ibn Kathir, that, this is a general confirmation. That's why he gave at the beginning of this, he says, we believe in what has been revealed to us and what has been revealed to you. It's a general answer. If you have something revealed, we believe in it. If you don't have something revealed, we reject it. We're not going to go into details and start looking about what's revealed and not. That's impossible. But if we want to be on the safe side, we answer in a general way without specifics. Subhanallah. And this is why the Prophet said, when the people of the book narrate something, you should not say it is true or that it is false. You should rather say, we believe in Allah, His books, and His prophets. This is the answer. But just give a general, look, I don't believe in your Bible. I believe in Allah, His books, and His prophets. I'm not rejecting anything of the Bible by saying that. I'm just affirming what I believe. And this is hence, if what they say is true, it would not be falsifying it. And if it is false, it would not be verifying it. So the question is, does the Quran address the Bible? No, it doesn't address the Bible by name. Okay, it doesn't address it by name, but it does mention that they substituted the real Torah and Injeel for what they wrote themselves. And I think this definitely includes the Bible amongst other books. Anything, basically, that they've written themselves claiming was from Allah. And the Quran in many places refutes the incorrect teachings of the Bible, for sure. It refutes the Trinity. It refutes all these evil things that they make up about Isa and Harun farming the golden cow, Suleiman dying on shirk. Of course, the Quran refutes all these things, and it corrects the narratives where the Bible has got it wrong and where the Bible has corrupted the original truth. So yes, although we're saying the Bible is not the Torah and Injeel, the Quran still does engage with the Bible. Okay, the Bible doesn't have to be in Medina in order for Allah to engage with it. By that time, the Bible was a prominent book. It was already in existence. It was already compiled and mutawatir to some extent amongst the Christian nations. But that doesn't mean it was in Medina. There's actually no evidence, as we pointed out. There's no evidence from the Hadith that the Bible was in Medina. There's no evidence from the historical narrative that the Bible was in Medina. And that's something that the Christians are yet to prove. However, even if it was in Medina, we've proved there was an alternative to an Injeel, which agrees with Islam, and we've proved that the Quran is referring to that one. So, but as we said, there's not actually any evidence that the Bible was in Medina at the time of the Prophet. It looks like the Bible came into the Muslim empire once the Muslims started to spread into Sham. After the Battle of Yarmouk, you've got Abdullah bin Amr as having loads of books from the people of the book, and you've got Jerusalem, etc. They definitely had the Bible then. So as Islam spread into the Christian lands, of course, they had access to the Bible. But at the time of the Prophet in Medina, it doesn't seem that the Bible was there. However, the Quran and Allah does engage with it